Sometimes things like this happen, especially in the rear. The front not so much, but the rear is, yeah, I would say sometimes pretty rusty. What the f is that? Or this? Okay, let's start it. It's dead. Things like these are annoying and cost you a lot of money. Therefore, we have an 80 series guide for you. We will give you an overview for things you need to look out for in order to get the most out of your 80 series. What we have here is the 4.2 24-valve inline-6 engine. Thing already starts to rust out. So buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the 80 series. What do we have here? There's a 97, so one of the last sold in Europe. It's a 24-valve engine, 5-gear manual, 3 times locked. If you live in the US, the holy grail. They did build the 80 series from 90, 91 to 97 here in Europe. From 90 to 95 it was the 12-valve engine, and from 95 to 97 the 24-valve engine. You have automatics and you have manuals. Around here automatics actually are not common. You have always 5-gear manuals with the big diesel engine, so 4.2 liter turbo, direct injection. And actually they are all locked, in Europe at least. I know in US it's different, but in Europe they are all locked. And now we will start part by part where you have to, what you have to look for. What you have to look for and what is important and what is not important on 80. You shouldn't buy the heavily modified ones. I mean, I know a suspension, tires, the rack, everything costs money, but there is a reason why they are modified, because they were used and you don't know actually how they used it. They could have took care, or they just beat the crap out of it. And then it will get expensive afterwards, really expensive. So I would consider buying a stock one, looking where and how it was used. Here in Austria, when you have a 4x4 and there are the mountains nearby, there are rust problems. Big rust problems, as you know from the 60. As mentioned, these rust problems can cost you a lot of money. As you can see on the 60 series we did lately, it can be quite excessive, but fortunately we are able to save the frame. But also this 100 series frame has seen better days. It was completely rusted out and needed a repair as soon as possible. This repair you will see in a future episode, but now let's get back to the 80 series. So rust is for sure a thing, but it is also a thing on a modified one. So go with the stock one, who is not abused. You will be much more satisfied with the car than as something like this. What is totally okay, but you never know. So now we will look at the body. We start how it is standing here. The 80 series, most of them, not all, have the flares. Flares look good. And the flares are there because when you have the 16-inch rims and the wide tires, they would stick out without flares. But the thing about flares is, when you remove them, there could be some rust behind it, especially in the rear. The front not so much, but the rear is, yeah, I would say sometimes pretty rusty. And the front is, first of all, they tend to rust around the window. They make nice bubbles, and when you see the bubbles, you can probably put a screwdriver through it when you put out the window. That's the same as on the 60s, but this, on the 60s, the actual windscreen is not glued. Here it is glued, so it is kind of problematic. We have here the front fender, and there we have the inner wheel well, and then they tend to rust on all the spots, because the wheel well is not a piece. It has some welded on strengthening parts, and from my experience, and also I have seen a lot of them, they rust through there. So take a look for it. The next thing we have are the rocker panels. As we see here on this black spot, this is where they rust through, because here the sidewall, the rocker panel and the inner panel go in each other, and you have 3 layers. I think, yeah, it is 3 layers, and they all rust through here. It is like most common things. The most 80s I do are rusted through here. In the front part, not so much. And also look from behind how the sheet metal lip looks. Here you see there are the actual spot welds, the original one, so nobody did anything to it. But in the in-between room where the two sheet metals are welded together, actually, they tend to rust. And I mean, it doesn't look much. Okay, I make here a patch on it, but if you go deeper in it, it could get very expensive. The next thing we do, we look at the doors. I mean, doors are just a car thing, but it is important also on my 80 series. If you open the doors, here you see the original sealant on it, and we see no rust. So actually we are good. But look for it, because replacement doors are freaking expensive. And also the thing with welding doors is you can weld them, but you still have the outer sheet metal hole on the frame, and it is clamped like this. And you never get rid of the rust when there is already rust in it. So it will be a never-ending story, actually. And after the doors, our next candidate is the rear quarter panel, or the sidewall, whatever you want to call it. And because we are standing here, this car has sliding windows. And when you have a car with sliding windows, you should look if they open from the inside and also if they seal, because I bought for mine all the rubber parts, all the seals, and it's plenty of money. The same is with the sunroof. Be sure it doesn't leak. It will be
pain in the ass
if it does. Now back to the sidewall. We have, as in the front, the flares on the sidewall actually, and the door. The thing is, the same as in the front, there will or can be rust behind it, so you should put your hand in it, and as here the dust comes out. Dust is okay. If you feel just soil in it and wet soil, there is probably rust behind it. Then we have the rear of the quarter panel behind the bumper. This car also has here a black mark, and it is patched. So that is where they rust through. This entire section downwards from this edge just rots away. So get your hand behind it, look from behind, and be sure there is no rust. Because, as I mentioned several times, rust repairs are the most expensive repairs. You have here the band from the sidewall who goes like this into the wheel arch, and there it rots just away. As here in the front, where you can see it actually, you have there the band, and in the bottom part of the band it just rots away. It is because there is always standing dirt in it, and it is always wet, because if the wheel is turning and it rains or it snows or whatever, it will just throw all the time the dirt on it. Same as when you drive through muddy or rocky terrain, it will just actually sandblast the wheel arch, and then it starts to rust. Where you have to look for is on the inner wheel arch. Here you have the strengthening part for the seat belt. I had several 80s where this part was rusted out, and you can see here where the body seal starts to crack and already detaches. And that's the points where salt, water, whatever can enter it and can go into the sheet metal, and this is where they rust through. And first you see nothing, and then there is a hole. And the next thing we look at are tailgates. You have barn door tailgates and up and down. I call it up and down tailgates now in English. The barn door tailgates are not really common here in Europe. They are rare, but they have the same problems as the normal four doors on the car. They tend to rust out. Same is with the tailgates. Look around the window. As we have here, this thing already starts to rust out, and if you put the glass out, probably in the edge, what you don't see because the rubber is over it, you will be able to put a screwdriver through it, because that is what it is. That's on most Land Cruisers, also on other cars. Around the windows, they tend to rust out. And I mean, you see it, so you can make a notice when you buy the car and it is overall in a good condition. Just has some minor rust spots. that you can calculate how much you will spend to bring it back in a decent condition. There is actually not much to look for besides rust. And be sure the wiper works and everything, because every part on a Toyota, especially an 80, is expensive. And now we have our hood. When it starts to bubble around this area and you see little bubbles here, for sure a hole. Because when we open the hood, we have, like on the doors, the inner piece and the outer piece. Here, where you see the seal, water get in. When you drive in the winter with these cars, everything is okay until temperature is over 0 degrees. Then the water in the hood will evaporate and the salt will stay in. And then you have, where I say the sheet metal is attached to each other, yeah, a problematic rust spot. It is just when rust is in, it will always rust. That's why be sure the car is as rust-free as possible, because they are old, and in old cars the biggest problems are always, or in this case here, is rust. Also, look down there, how rusty are everything around the AC cooler, also under the battery trays. I mean, it's hard to check or nearly impossible to check. Under this side of the car you have the glow relay under the battery tray, and it tends to be rusty as hell down there. The same on the right side. Besides, you don't have a glow relay. Just look how is the overall condition in terms of sheet metal. And now we will go to the roof. This car doesn't have a sunroof, but if it had the full glass sunroof, it is like, yeah, it's rubber. Around the glass is a lot of rubber, and the cars are all 30 years old. So the rubber, especially on the roof, is always in the sun. It gets hard and brittle, and then it starts to leak. And where is a leak, there will be water, there will be rust, there will be mold, there will be just a problem. And that's why be sure it slides open, it does close, it does tilt. And also, if you have, let's say, a garden hose or something, put water on it just to be sure there is no leakage. What we have here is the 4.2 24 valve inline 6 engine. It was back then the pinnacle of the 80. There was nothing better afterwards because there was no 80. Sure, they put it in the 100. It does have more power than the 80, but that is a whole different story. So, what you look for on the engine? The engine has a timing belt. Be sure the timing belt is done, because if the timing belt rips off, he is dead, or at least the valves are dead. The interval on the timing belt is 100,000 kilometers, or I think 7 years. And you should be very curious about that when you buy the car, because as I said, when it rips off, the valves are done. And then you have to spend like thousands in repairing the engine. The next thing, we see here some lines. This is the fuel lines, they're going to the injectors. The injectors are under the valve cover on the 80 series, and they should be checked occasionally if the spray pattern is right, if the pressure is right, because an injector, as it is, can f up your entire engine, or at least melt down the pistons. What is, yeah, a major engine damage. And then, look how oily it is. Is it oily? Is it not oily? Are the gaskets good? Also, on the 80s especially, or at least in the European 80s, they have a EGR, so they backflow the exhaust gases into the engine. Is it still there? It's these two things, they are already connected to each other, so it doesn't work.
Right to jail.
Or it is blocked off, and that is just if you live in a country where that thing matters.
Believe it or not, jail.
And it is not on it, and just block off plates.
Right to jail, right away. No trial, no nothing.
And you have to drive through inspection. It is very, yeah, it is clear someone just put it off, and that thing is expensive, so look for it. The 24 valve engine is actually really bulletproof. There are no major flaws known. The 12-valve engine is a different story. There are, let's say, sometimes problems with conrod bearings and main bearings. So you should take a closer look. I mean, obviously you can't look at it, but you can drive it, listen to it. If it makes a rattling or, let's say, a metallic noise, that's then the bottom end bearings. Especially when it has a lot of kilometers on it or is a high mileage vehicle, it's a common thing. You should listen also on this engine how it sounds. The engine does have, on a regular oil change, about 10 liters of motor oil. If it is a dry fill, it is around 11 to 12. So when you start up the car, when it is cold, it takes a lot of time to get the oil up in the head. And everywhere it needs to be, turbocharger and so on. And I mean, there are people who start a car and just drive out on the autobahn or highway and throttle it. Can't be good for the engine, so you should listen to it, how the engine is sounding. So, the next thing is radiator. Look at the radiator, look at the hoses. This is very important. How old are the hoses? Because most of these things are overlanders and you drive in the summer, in the heat and so on. And as I always mention, coolant is actually a very important thing, because when you blow one of these hoses, you will overheat the engine and then lots of dollars. The next thing we do, we start it up. So what it did here was, it was running smooth. You didn't hear the valves, because the valves also need adjustment. It has overheld valves, but you can adjust it. So be sure it is adjusted, and you would hear it. It's a ticking noise. And then if you rev up the engine, it gets faster, like that is mostly not adjusted valves, as here on the 24-valve engine, and same on the 100 series with the 24. They need valve adjustment. And what also to look for is the radiator. Look in the bottom to be sure the radiator isn't leaking and does look good. The same is with the fan. If you grip the fan, you can feel when you spin it, it doesn't spin free. There is a little bit of, I would say, tension, and that's the hydraulic clutch. If it spins free, the hydraulic clutch is just gone. Let's say you have to drive it further, yeah, so it warms up, it really warms up. And when you rev it up, then you hear the fan. It is like a whoosh, whoosh sound. Then you know, okay, it does engage. It's very important, because especially if you drive off-road and you drive very slow and rev the engine high in the gears, you need a sufficient cooling. Without that, it would overheat at some point. And now the next part will be on the left, where you see more. We are now heading back to the shop to get the car on the lift. And we will use the time in between for a test drive. So what is important when you do a test drive with a 80? First of all, on this car is modified, so it is lifted. Look how it drives. Look how it steers. Because when you drive a car where someone just has done springs and shocks, the steering geometry could be off by a lot. If it is just lifted by like an inch or so, it's not a problem, but everything above 2, the car starts to, let's say, drive a little bit funny. So be sure how it steers, how it acts when you like really steer, if it really swims or something, and also how much play is in the steering. Next thing is, look how it shifts. It should, I mean, you can't actually shift them fast because the transmissions are so big and heavy, but it should shift smoothly. Also the clutch you should feel on the clutch a pressure point and not just squishy something. On this car it is squishy something, but I know why, because the slave cylinder is more or less shot. Next thing is the engine. How does it sound for you? Does it sound normal? Is there metallic or ticking noises? The car stock, or is there an intercooler on it, more boost, different turbocharger, and so on? If it is stock like this one with just the exhaust, it is kinda sluggish, but I know this car was weighted with all the overlanding gear. It is about 3.2 tons without guys in it. It feels a bit sluggish because it is heavy. Yeah. Next thing is, if you have something like this, 80 with lockers, drive on gravel or grass, engage the lockers. Put it in 4-wheel low, then normally the middle differential should engage and the light should come on for the middle differential lock. And afterwards engage rear and front locker. It is on the left side of the steering wheel. The turning push button. When the car is standing and the lockers weren't engaged for a long time, you probably have to move the car a little bit, like back and forth, and steer a little bit, and then they should normally engage, stop blinking, and there should be the light on. If not, if they don't engage, there is something off about the lockers, and that could be expensive, so be sure they engage. Just look if everything in the inside works. All the power windows, if the cruise control works, just go through it. Take your time, because everything on 80 is expensive. That's just 80. And now we will get a little closer in it in the shop. We're back in the shop. I already lifted the car, or put it on the lift. I have a 2-post lift, and this thing has long range tanks in the rear. When you ask yourself why I don't lift it higher because it is so rear heavy, it is a little bit dangerous. We will start on the left side in the front. There we have the steering box on this car. I know on this car the steering box already was got new seals. So look on the steering box if it leaks. Around here you have the pitman arm, and there is a seal in it. Look if the steering box is dry. It is important because it's just painful to get it out and put new seals in it, get it in, especially if you're not a mechanic. Next thing is, when you look also into that car, as I already mentioned, is lifted. The stabilizer has spaces in it to get everything down. The next thing is, this car drives, let's say, when you drive faster, it has the tendency to steer itself a little bit left and right, so you always have to correct it a bit. I talked to the owner said there are caster correction bushings in there, but I assume it's the wrong ones for the wrong lift height. The car just has a problem with the caster angle. When you want to know what a caster angle is, the caster angle more or less is, if this is, let's say, the axle from the side, and there you have the rear pinion of the differential where the drive shaft goes up to the transmission. On the front axle, the axle just stands too steep because the car was lifted. So when you lift the car, there's the car, and you lift it with springs, the car goes up, so the transmission goes up and everything goes up, and also the axle goes up. So the angle gets more, and then more or less the steering geometry is off, and then they start. That's why I mentioned before on the test drive if they are over 2 inch, and this car is for sure over 2 inch because this car is heavy as beep and still is high, and that's why it's probably drives a little bit funny. So when we go to the front of the car and look underneath it, we are still on the front axle. We see, because the owner does search the problem for the funny driving behavior, you see, look always for the front axle if they are dry. Someone did the front axle, as redid the front axle, new seals, new everything. Also we see here on the panhard there is an adjustable one in. as I mentioned before, get the steering geometry and also the suspension geometry right. Look overall for rust. How rusty is this car? I mean, this car was probably his whole life an overlander, but still isn't much rusty, at least for Austrian circumstances. There is a new steering damper in it. Then look back on the engine. Is the engine oily? This engine is dry. It is pretty dry. For a 30-year-old 4x4, there is only the grease on the right side of the oil pan from the driving shaft. When I look back on the transmission, it's the same on the transmission. When you, under the car, wiggle the drive shaft. When you wiggle the drive shaft, like this, I already see the drive shaft was overhauled. But when you wiggle it, there should be no play in the pinion of the differential. This is very important because if there is play in it, you have to redo or let's say put new bearings into the differential, so rebuild it. The same is on the transmission side in the back. You should wiggle it and be sure the transfer case has no play in it. Overall, just when you are in that area, look for rust. Rust is mostly around here, where, as I already mentioned, the two sheet metal pieces on the rocker panel meet each other. Same in the rear. If you are wiggle the drive shaft in the rear, if the rear differential has no play in it, the same transfer case on the transfer case side. Look overall, that is very important for rust, or if it is dry in terms of oil. When we get to the rear, when you're underneath it, look around here how rusty it is. In that area they are normally rusted to hell. I already said this one has a black patch here, so it was already welded from the outside. From the inside it looks actually pretty good because it was just a summer overlander. What we see here, because we don't see a spare tire, is a big ass Long Ranger fuel tank. Also you see here adjustable panhard for the rear, no adjustable upper links, but should be enough for that size of lift on this car. The same is look for brakes, look on the brake lines, brake hoses, everything. Just get an overall picture of the car, because a lot of little things add up to a still big money pile, especially in terms of 80s. The 80s, yeah, they are kind of expensive in spare parts. It is not a 60 series Land Cruiser, because the 60 series actually doesn't have much. The 80 does have much more, especially the later ones where everything is electric. Just look overall that everything is in a, let's say, age-wise good condition. For me, is it always important how is the technical side, like engine, trans, clutch, rust, how are the bearings, and let's say paint and so on. If paint is for you important, then okay. For me it is not important, because paint is just paint. A car drives with a good engine, a good transmission, a good suspension, and probably it is also good if the frame is not so rusty that it will break in half. So that's for me the important things on a 80. More or less you could say, if it is a 80, if it is a 60, if it is a 100, it's mostly the same things. Just look that the condition of the car fits the price and also your needs. That is the most important thing. If it is your first 4x4, it is a little bit difficult, but just advice from me, just get into it. Don't have on Monday the idea I want to buy a 80 series Land Cruiser and buy one on Tuesday. So really go into it, go into the forums, everything, look out for every bit of information you can get. Then probably you will make a good deal for yourself. Just don't make an impulse buys, especially on 80s, 100s, because they can get expensive very fast. And that is pretty much everything for this episode.
I wanna try.